Hi, this is Danny from MABRIK, and we're back again with another video for Star Wars Unlimited. We're going to break this down into a two-part series video, split between leaders from the hero side and leaders from the villain side. In the first video, we're going to be talking about the hero side, and we've picked 3 leaders that we're going to actually focus on. So with this video, we'll be focusing on Leia Organa, Luke Skywalker, and Hera Syndulla. Each of them have their own unique aspects and abilities, which we'll go through in a little bit more detail. In Star Wars Unlimited, there are 12 different leaders that you can choose from, 8 regular bases, and 4 more specialized bases. Each of these leaders has their own unique aspects. There are 6 aspect symbols in total. There is vigilance, aggression, heroism, command, cunning, and villainy. Depending on which leader you choose, they'll have a specific set of aspects that you have to basically put your deck around, and then you can always add an additional aspect from whichever base you decide to choose. As there's a lot of variety with this, you can put any leader with any base. It certainly would give up a lot more to different types of decks with different types of aspects. Right, first we're going to talk about the Luke Skywalker deck. Now, the first thing you need to think about is the leader themselves and what kind of abilities do they actually have. So when we look at Luke Skywalker, we can see that his ability is for 1 resource, he can give a shield token to a heroism unit that you've played this phase. So that means that he makes it a lot easier to never waste resources. You can always at least put a shield token to protect one of your heroism units that you play this turn. With that in mind, you're also going to be thinking you're going to be running a lot of units and cards that have this specific heroism symbol in them. Now, when you're building a deck for Star Wars Unlimited, your main deck has to consist of at least a minimum of 50 cards. Also, in a constructive deck, you're also allowed to have a 10-card sideboard as well, which between games, you're allowed to switch out cards in order to make some changes to your deck to help you maybe get the upper hand against your opponent. Now, another thing to bear in mind is what they call a resource curve, or for those of you who are playing Magic, a mana curve. If you have too many cards that are on the high cost end, then it's going to be a lot harder to play them out very quickly compared to if you have more cards on the lower cost end. But you need to be able to balance this between cheaper cards and the more expensive heavy hitting cards. Now, for me, the way I've gone with building the Luke deck is I went for more of an aggro step to it, so hence me adding this red aggression colored base to it. That way I'm allowed to take any cards with the aggression symbol, with the vigilance symbol, and the heroism symbol. And as you can see from the cards I've laid out in front of me here, they all mostly cover this symbol. Some of them have just one of those aspects, some of them have a combination of them. But the advantage of this is that it doesn't matter which card I'm actually playing right now. I don't have to pay any what they call aspect penalties for any of the cards that I play. I just have to play whatever cost they actually have on the card, as all the aspect symbols are cancelled out by my leader and my base. In my opinion, Luke Skywalker is one of the easier leaders to play because his ability is quite simple. It just allows you to spend 1 resource and attach a shield token to one of these heroism units that you've played this turn. Another thing to bear in mind is what they call the rule of 3. If you want a card to come out more frequently, you need to have more copies of it. However, in Star Wars Unlimited, you can only ever have a maximum of 3 copies of any one specific card in your deck. Going back to something we spoke about in an earlier video, the idea of unique cards. So, unique cards are a card with this small star symbol next to their name. If you're playing cards with this symbol, you do remember that you can only play one of these in play at any one time. You can have multiples of them in your deck, up to 3 copies of course, but only one can be in play at any one time. In deck construction for Luke Skywalker here, for example, you need to focus on the keywords. Keywords are a very deciding factor in building your decks. As we can see from here, Luke has 2 keywords at his name, Force and Rebel. In that respect, most of my deck here is built around the idea of Force cards and Rebel cards. because there are a lot of cards that give bonuses like +1/+1s to other rebel cards, or +1/+1s to other force cards, etc, etc. So the more of the specific keywords you can match together and synergize, the better your deck will perform, and hopefully be able to get a bigger advantage over your opponent. Lastly, before we go into more of the synergies that this deck actually has, I want to talk about the sideboard. You can have this 10-card sideboard in your deck, which is normally a utility tool. So, for example, you're getting beaten in the ground or beaten in space, you need more ways to get rid of stuff, so removal, or you just find that you're getting stuck by a certain thing an opponent has. You can have certain cards in your sideboard just to help switch in with other cards that you have that might be less effective, just to kind of help balance it out and hopefully get the upper hand against your opponent. Now we're going to go into a few of the more comprehensive mechanics of this deck and how it kind of works. To start with, we're going to focus on R2-D2 and C-3PO. They're a very, very interesting combo when used together. So with R2-D2, you look at the top card of your deck. You may put it on the bottom of your deck if you don't like it. Otherwise, you can leave it on the top. This is when you play this card and when you attack with it. C-3PO also has a when played on attack card. His one states, you choose a number, then look at the top card of your deck. If the cost of the card is the chosen number you've selected, you may reveal it and draw it. Otherwise, you leave it on the top of the deck. You have to do this by guessing blindly. However, using them in tandem, you get to look at the card with R2-D2, and that way you can never fail to guess what the number is because you've already pre-seen it. Therefore, you're always going to be able to draw an additional card into your hand, which is a nice cool ability for getting more cards into your hand to play with. Next, I want to talk about a couple of buffs that I have in the deck. The first one being the Fleet Lieutenant. So when you play him, you may attack with a unit. If it has the Rebel keyword, it gets +2 for the specific attack that it attacks with. So this is a good way to make one of your Rebel units a little bit bigger before it attacks. The next one is General Dodona. He's very useful because he buffs all your other cards that have the Rebel keyword. He gives them all a +1/+1. So he's very useful to keep out and about. Maybe give him some shield tokens to protect him so he stays out longer, just to make all of your units a lot bigger. Then we have what I would call the heavy hitters of this deck. So these are all the Force units, so kind of all the Jedis. So we have Mace Windu, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi, we have Bendu, we have Yoda, we have Kanan Jarrus, and we have Zeb Orrelios. All of these work really, really well together, especially like Kanan Jarrus and Zeb Orrelios, because Kanan Jarrus has a special ability that when he attacks, you may discard one card from the defending player's deck for each friendly Spectre unit, so having the Spectre keyword, and you may heal 1 damage from your base for each different aspect among those discarded cards. So if you can play attack at the same time you have Zeb in the battlefield, it allows you to discard 1 card from their deck and potentially heal 1 or 2 from your base, which is kind of a cool ability. Now, because Kanan Jarrus is also a Force unit, he'll work with any ability that also uses the Force keyword, as do all of the other ones here. Continuing on that line of Force units, let's talk about our leader himself. When he eventually comes into play, he has 2 upgrades that basically can be put on him, or they can be put on any other unit that has that Force keyword. So these 2 upgrades are Luke's lightsaber, which can be attached to a non-vehicle unit, and it gives that unit +3/+1. So +3 to the attack and +1 to their defense. When you play it though, if it's attached to Luke Skywalker himself, you can heal all the damage that's been taken from him and then give him a shield token. So kind of a good way to do this with Luke's lightsaber is to attack with Luke, and then in the following turn, you attach this to him, which will heal all the damage he's taken from the previous attack, and also gives him a shield token to protect him. And the other one is the Jedi lightsaber. Again, you can attach it to a non-vehicle unit. However, if this one is attached to a Force unit, then it gains that when that unit attacks, it gives the defender of the attack a -2/-2 for this phase. The unit itself gets +3 and +3. As the Jedi lightsaber is not a unique card, you can also stack them. So you could end up with like both of these attached to like Luke Skywalker, for example, and then he has +6 and +4 to his generic attack of 4 and 7. So he basically becomes a 10-11, which makes him quite beefy and quite scary to deal with. Moving on to a few of the kind of key space units that I have in this deck for fighting on the other platform. I have this very cheapy kind of restored Arc 170, which has the restore ability of 1, which basically means that every time you attack with it, it heals 1 damage from your base. Kind of simple, but cool nonetheless. A very key card in this in the space theme is the Wing Leader. Now, when you play this Wing Leader onto the field, you can attach 2 +1/+1 counters onto any friendly rebel unit. So any other unit you have in play that has the rebel keyword, it will basically get 2 +1/+1 counters on it. The next one here is Red 3. Now, Red 3 is kind of a cool little card that basically it has this ability called Raid 1, which basically means that when this card attacks, it gets +1 to its attack. However, it has a secondary ability. For each other friendly heroism unit that's on the table, they also will get that Raid 1. So any other card you have on the table with this heroism symbol gets +1 when they attack. So with having all these kind of buffs on the deck, you can kind of see now how the deck can really buff up, and then you can be swinging in with quite large amounts of damage, as long as they can stay on the battlefield long enough. And then lastly, from the space units, kind of a piece de résistance at the end, we have the Redemption. This one has this keyword called Sentinel, which is very useful because Sentinel basically means that your opponent cannot attack your base, it has to attack this ship first. However, it has a secondary kind of cool ability that when you play this to the battlefield, it has the option to heal up to 8 total damage from either units or your base in any combination you like, and it also deals that much damage to a unit on the opponent's side. And then lastly, just a few other key cards that kind of stand out in the deck for me are a few of these special event cards. So I have like Force Throw, which means I can choose a player, including myself, and I discard a card from my hand. If you control a Force unit, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the cost of that discarded card. And that can be either yourself or your opponent. I have this Force Surrender card, which basically means I get to draw 2 cards. And each opponent whose base you've damaged this fade also will discard 2 cards from their hand. I have this one here, The Force is With Me. A very useful card to have. You choose a friendly unit and give 2 +1/+1 counters to it. If you also have one of these Force units in play at the same time when you play this, you can also give a shield token to that same unit you gave the +1/+1 counters to it. And then following that, you may also attack with the same unit. I also have some of these Moments of Peace, which basically you can play them for a 1 cost and they give a shield to any unit of your choice. And finally, it binds all things. It allows you to heal up to 3 damage from a singular unit, but if you control a Force unit on the table, you may also deal that much damage to another unit, whether it be friend or foe. It's entirely up to you. That kind of concludes here the brief overview of the Luke Skywalker deck.